We are in a series, for those of you that haven't been here, about Yah's family. Okay? We've been in this, I've been dragging this out for several months. Today we're going to start in the book of Judges, and we're going to, what I anticipate pointing out is that Yah has his people. He has not his people that are already in the land, and he's controlling both sides as we go through this. We're going to see that he is overseeing both sides of the equation, and he's working things as he sees, as he desires. We covered last week that the prophet Isaiah tells us, records for us that he says, my ways are not your ways. My ways are much higher than your ways. Okay? So for us to try to figure it out, it's probably not going to happen. But as we begin, I'm going to highlight through here, again, what I just said. We're capturing highlights. We find Yah's people in the land. Joshua's already done the conquest, and we find Yah's people in the land, but they're not alone. And I want to recap real briefly, I hope, how we got to be my people and into the land. So the original call was to Abram, you remember? And that was in Genesis 12, right? Now Yah had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. So he brings up the land. Here it comes. He's going to take him to that land that he's going to show him. Now the call is further defined a bit later in Genesis 15 when Yah made a covenant with Abram. On that same day, Yah made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I will give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. That's quite a chunk of property right there. And in verses 19, 20, and 21, he calls out many of them by name. The Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. We're going to see those names several times as we go through there. They're already in the land. If his people were in Egypt, and he delivered his people out of Egypt and brought them to the land, these aren't his people. Make sense? All right, and then in Genesis 17, Abram becomes Abraham. I'm not going to make it. I'm going to go on a side trip here in just a second. Abram becomes Abraham, and the promise continues down the line of Abraham, not Abram. Very important. It continues down the line of Abraham, not Abram. Genesis 17:5. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham. For I have made you father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. Verse 7. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim to you and your descendants after you. Verse 8. And also I give you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim. Now jump down to verse 18. And Abraham said to Elohim, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. And in verse 19, Elohim said, no, Sarah, your wife, shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I've blessed him, and will make it fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. Verse 21, but my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you. What does that last part say? At the set time next year. Okay? Abram was called. Isaac is called, if you want to look at it that way, in this verse. He's called by name. He's going to be a male child. And Sarah, the barren wife of Abram for a long time, is going to be the one that bears it. He's called. Okay? He's called ahead of time. Now, remind me to go back to that if we got time afterwards. The land and its inhabitants are mentioned in Exodus at least 3 times as we skip through here. I'm focusing on the land and all the people that are in it as we're getting ready to go look through Judges. In Exodus 3, Yah says, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. Okay? Going back just a second, when I ask you to remind this, all of Yah's people are called. All right, verse 8. So I have come down to deliver them, says Yah, out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up into a good and large land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Here they are again. Yah already knows who's there. The land is flowing with milk and honey. We've touched on this before, but I'll bring it up again here. What does it take for the land to be flowing with milk and honey? It's got to be operating the way that Yah, all right? In order to get the milk and the honey, all the things have to be working the way they're supposed to be working. Okay? That's happening. Exodus 3:16. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, Yahweh your Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, appeared to me, saying, I have surely visited you and seen what is done in Egypt. Now this is Yah talking to Moses, okay? And I said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, to a land flowing with milk and honey. Okay? So get the picture. The land's already prepared. He's taking them to it. Exodus 23 verse 20. Behold, I send an angel before you and to keep you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. He's allowed that land to be prepared already. And that's not the first time in Scripture he's done that. Before Adam was created and Eve was made, the garden was prepared for them, was it not? We're told in the upper room in John chapter 14, Yeshua says, I go to prepare a place for you. Right? It's planned out. Verse 21. Beware of him, this messenger, this angel, and obey his voice, and do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. Verse 22. But if you indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. There's an if to that, huh? Verse 23. For my angel will go before you and bring you into the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. He's already said that's what he's going to do. Now this is piggybacking, some of you weren't here last week, this is piggybacking off of something that I brought up last week. Paul writes in Romans 9, well, I think I got it in here. Again, and I do, and we'll get to it. All right, Joshua mentions all these other peoples in the beginning of Joshua. He says the same thing. In Joshua chapter 3, verse 9, Joshua said to the children of Israel, "Come here and hear the words of Yahweh your Elohim." Verse 10, Joshua said, "By this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Hivites and the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites." This group is also mentioned at the end of the book of Joshua as well, and this time it's by Yah himself. Joshua 24, verse 11, "Then you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho, and the men of Jericho fought against you, also the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. But I delivered them into your hand." Okay? He did the delivering. I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out before you. Also the two kings of the Amorites, but not with the sword or with the bow. Verse 13. "I have given you a land for which you did not labor, and cities which you did not build, and you dwell in them. You eat of the vineyards of the olive groves, which you did not plant." Now, Judges 1 and Judges 2 are a recap of the conquest of the land. But let's turn to Judges chapter 2, verse 1. Judges chapter 2, verse 1. All right. "The angel of Yah came up from Gilgal to Bochum and said, I led you up from Egypt and brought you to the land which I swore to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you." He said he's never going to break his covenant. "And you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land. You shall tear down their altars. But you have not obeyed my voice." Why have you done this? This is in the beginning of the book. He's telling them, I told you this. I told you you shouldn't make those. I told you not to make those covenants. Verse 3. "Therefore I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall be thorns in your side, and their gods shall be a snare to you." Jump down to verse 7. "So the people served Yah all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works of Yah, which he had done in Israel." So we're being told here, as long as Joshua and the elders were alive, they were obeying. They saw the works of Yah as they were coming across. Verse 8. "Now Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of Yah, died when he was 110 years old. And they buried him with the border of his inheritance at the Timnath Ares in the mountains of Ephraim on the north side of Mount Gaash. When all that generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation arose from them who did not know Yah, nor the work which he had done from Israel." That's kind of important. Remember, we say the Shema, and when we're saying what we're saying up there, we're talking about we need to pass this on to our children, right? This next generation didn't see the magnificent hand of Yah as the Red Sea parted, or as the Jordan River parted, or as so many different things that the water came out of the rock. They didn't visually see that. when you experience something, experience is something that you just can't pass on to somebody else. If you're fishing, you can catch a fish and then you can explain to somebody what it was like for you to catch that fish. But they don't really understand it until they themselves catch a fish and understand what that is like, until they experience it. Well, this generation didn't experience any of that. And so what continues to happen, let's read, I'm going to read through Judges 2:11 through 23. 11 through 23. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of Yah, and served the Baals, and they forsook Yahweh their Elohim, Yahweh Elohim of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt, and they followed other gods from among the gods of the people who were all around them. And they bowed down to them, and they provoked Yah to anger. They forsook Yah and served Baal and the Ashtoreths, and the anger of Yah was hot against Israel. So he delivered them into the hands of the plunderers, who despoiled them, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies all around, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Wherever they went out, the hand of Yah was against them for calamity. And Yah had said, as Yah had said, and as Yah had sworn to them. And they were greatly distressed. Nevertheless, Yah raised up judges who delivered them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they would not listen to their judges, but they played the harlot with other gods and bowed down to them. Then they turned quickly away from the way in which their fathers walked, and obeying the commandments of Yah. They did not do so. And when when Yah raised up judges for them, Yah was with the judge and delivered them out of the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For Yah was moved with pity by their groaning because of those who were oppressed and harassed them. And it came to pass, when the judge was dead, that they reverted and behaved more corruptly than their fathers by following other gods to serve them and bow down to them. They did not cease from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way. When the anger of Yah was hot against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant which I commanded their fathers, and has not heeded my voice, I will no longer drive out before them the other nations which Joshua left when he died, so that through them I may test Israel, whether they will keep the ways of Yah, to walk in them as their fathers kept them, or not. Therefore Yah left those nations without driving them out immediately, nor did he deliver them into the hands of Joshua. Okay? So, we're all familiar with those stories. In verse 14, it told us that the anger of Yah was hot against Israel. He is the one that delivered Israel into the hand of the plunderers, who despoiled them. The plunderers just despoiled them. And he's the one that sold them into the hands of their enemies. Now, this should not be a surprise if we're familiar with the Torah, because Deuteronomy 28 tells us these things are going to happen if you disobey what I tell you to do. He's in control of this whole thing. He's punishing his own people for their disobedience, and he's using those that he raised up for that very purpose. Okay, that's what we were talking about in Romans 9. I think we'll get to it in a minute. Last week. Into their hands of the enemies all around, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Whenever they went out, Yah's hand was against them. Okay? Whenever they went out, it was Yah's hand against his own people because of their disobedience. That's a pattern, by the way. It's still going on for any of you who are wondering. Okay? As Yah has said, and as he swore to them. Now, what he said and he swore to them, I'm just telling you, Moses wrote that down for us in Deuteronomy 28. He wrote all that down for us. Here's the blessings. Remember the little, you got 7 or 8 verses of blessings or something like that, and you got 5.5 pages of curses. If they don't, and they don't do. Okay, so the curses came. Nevertheless, Yah raised up the judges. He still has mercy in all this, okay? Who delivered them out of the hand of those who plundered them. He raises up the judge. The judge is chosen, okay? These people that were attacking his own people were chosen. They were selected. Okay, that was their purpose. Judges 2 verse 20. And the anger of Yah was hot against Israel, and he said, because this nation transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and has not heeded my voice, I will no longer drive them out, any of the nations which Joshua left when he died, so that through them I may test Israel. He's going to test Israel through these people, whether or not they're going to keep his commands. Whether or not they're going to keep the ways of Yah and walk in them as their fathers kept them. Now, remember too, as Moses started out Deuteronomy in chapter 8, he tells the people, remember how Yahweh your Elohim led you all the way in the desert these 40 years to humble you and to test you. He was testing them. He still tests us today. He brings these tests about. We come up against a situation, and oftentimes, you know, when you're young in the walk, you don't understand, or you're learning, hey, wait, I'm not supposed to be doing this, or I am supposed to be doing this, or whatever, and you pick it up from there. But as you grow on, as you mature, you still come up to these situations, and sometimes you say, I know I'm not supposed to, but, well, you know, that doesn't work out well for us very often at all, right? Therefore Yah left those nations without driving them out immediately, nor did he deliver them into the hand of Joshua. Now, here we go. We're going to go into Romans 9. I brought this up last week, and this is why I brought it up. It's significant. We're going to bring it up again. In Romans 9:21, Paul says, does not the potter have power over the clay for the same lump to make one vessel of honor and one vessel of dishonor? He can make the vessels however he wants to make the vessels. And he does. He does exactly how he wants to make the vessels. Verse 22. What, in brackets there, if Elohim, wanting to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction. Some of those vessels of wrath were those names that you heard as we were reading through here. He allowed them to do, they carried out a purpose. They got the land to the place of flowing with milk and honey, where he was going to bring his people, and he used those people to discipline his own people when they disobeyed him. His ways are not our ways. They're much higher than our ways. We probably wouldn't have done it that way. Verse 23, and that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had prepared beforehand for glory. Now, he does this. He uses these people to discipline his children, and then we turn around and see where he raises up this judge to stomp out the very ones that were disciplining his children. The purpose was done. The purpose was finished for them, and he carried it on. He went on. Now, those vessels of wrath are the very ones he turned his people over to. They're also the very ones that he rose the judge up against to destroy. Now, continuing into Judges, in chapter 3, verse 1, now these are the nations which Yah left, that he might test Israel by them. That is, all who had not known any of the wars in Canaan. This was only so that the generations of the children of Israel might be taught to know war, at least those who had not known it formerly. I want to stop here for a second because I want to talk about this for a second. As we go through the book of Judges, as you remember and you recall from the book of Joshua when they were doing the conquest, it was, I almost said always, but it wasn't always, because sometimes they went ahead. But in most cases, Yah went ahead of them. There were a couple of cases they went ahead of Yah, and that didn't turn out too well. But in most cases, Yah went ahead of them. And even though he went ahead of them, even though he sent that hornet ahead of them, okay, there was still something that they had to do, something that they had to carry out. We have the same thing. We're in a spiritual war. We don't use the same weapons. But there's things Yah's going to do, and then there's things that we have to take care of ourselves. And it is also part of the testing. He's testing us as we're going through. And testing is stretching and bringing us out of our comfort zone and making us uncomfortable. And this hurts, and we don't like it, and I don't want to do it. But you end up doing it anyway because you decided you're going to be obedient to what he says, not what the world is drawing you towards. Okay? All right, so verse 3. Namely, 5 lords of the Philistines, and of the Canaanites, and of the Sidonians, and the Hivites, who dwelt in Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hermon to the entrance of Hamath. Verse 4. And they were left that he might test Israel by them, to know whether they would obey the commandments of God, which he had commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. So we just went back to that, okay? He causes us to hunger, and then he feeds us with manna, which neither our fathers nor us had known. He puts us in situations where we don't know what we're going to do. And then he makes a way as we rely on him and as we stay faithful to him. Verse 5. Thus the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And they took, here we go, okay, they dwelt among them, and he expects us to live differently than the world is living, okay? What we see in verse 6, they took their daughters to be their wives, and they gave their daughters to their sons, and they served their gods. So the children of Israel did evil in the sight of Yah, and they forgot Yahweh their Elohim, and served the Baals and the Ashers. Did they forget them altogether? No. No. Did they do what the first commandment says? No. No. Okay? When we love him with all of our heart and all of our mind and all of our strength, there's no room for the Baals. Okay? Having said that, when Yeshua said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, he's talking about doing spiritual things and being obedient to Yah. That's what he's talking about. The spirit is willing to be obedient. The flesh is extremely weak at being obedient to Yah. Yeah, the flesh is going to run after the fly, squirrel, fan, something, cookie, whatever it is. Something bright and shiny is going to draw your attention away. It is a war. It is a war. And ultimately the answer to the way to battle that war, Yeshua told him in the upper room in John 15, abide in me and I will abide in you. If we abide in the Word, He is the Word. If we abide in the Word, there's less room. I've been having some struggles these past couple of weeks, months. Anytime you decide you're going to battle the flesh on something, you have just declared an awesome war. Okay? And the more you try to do it yourself, the more your failures are glaring. I have to allow God to do it from the inside. And the only way to do that is to keep abiding. And you know what? He doesn't, and I wasn't paying attention, and all of a sudden, He did it. Where I may have, I'm not eating that second cookie. Well, the only way not to eat that second cookie is don't eat that first one, in my case, okay? Now, maybe some of y'all got a lot more cookie willpower than I got. I'm just using that as an example. But if I don't eat the first one, I'm okay. I get in trouble. And I know better. Not that any of you have any struggles like that or anything. I'm sure you got it all under control. You don't have any of those things. Verse 8. Therefore the anger of Yah was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of the king of Mesopotamia. No, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. I tried it while I was studying, and I sprayed my tongue. I'm not doing it again. And the children of Israel served the king of Mesopotamia 8 years. Interesting thing here. Where's Mesopotamia? What is Mesopotamia? Who came from Mesopotamia?
Abraham.
Isn't that interesting? Abram came from. Yep. Interesting. It's all one story. Same people, same players. Verse 9. When the children of Israel cried out to Yah, Yah raised up a deliverer for the children of Israel, who delivered them. Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. Now this first one's kind of cool. It's Caleb's younger brother that he raises up, right? The Spirit of Yah came upon him, and he judged Israel. He went out to war, and Yah delivered the king of Mesopotamia into his hand, and his hand prevailed over the king. So the land was at rest for 40 years. Then Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died. So for 8 years they served the king of Mesopotamia. They cried out to Yah. Yah raises a judge, and the land is okay for 40 years. But as soon as the judge dies, they go right back to what they were doing before. Only it says it's worse. Okay? That cycle goes throughout Judges. We're going to pick a couple of we're going to pick a few of the judges and go through them in detail and draw them out and look at some of the things that have taken place. Now, something that's interesting. The Spirit of Yah comes upon the judge. That's a constant. Okay? Our war is a spiritual war. Okay? We need that spirit. Well, okay, so I want to pick up in, let's see, that was 3:11. All right, verse 12. This is just the start of what we'll be going into like next week. Verse 12. And the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of Yah. So Yah strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel. Moab, that sounds familiar too, doesn't it? Okay. Now I want to go back to something that we talked about as Yah, because this is about Yah's family. I want you to go back to Genesis 17. wasn't sure whether this was going to go in or not, but it's going. Genesis 17 is divided into 7. All right, I'm going to pick it up at verse 1 of Genesis 17. When Abram was 99 years old, Yah appeared to Abram and said, I am Almighty Elohim, El Shaddai. Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly. Then Abram fell on his face, and Elohim talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. Okay. For quite some time, I wondered why, during the sacrifice of Isaac, Yah said, take Isaac, your only son. Because Isaac was the son of Abraham. Ishmael was not the son of Abraham. So Isaac was Abraham's only son. Okay? See how that fits together? As we keep reading. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you and their generations for an everlasting covenant. To be God to you and your descendants after you. Also, I will give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim. So he's giving Abraham's descendants the land. That's the covenant. And Elohim said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of the foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Okay, now on that, right there, on the topic of circumcision, I want you to think with me outside the box for just a couple of minutes. The circumcision is the cutting away of the flesh. Okay? It's the cutting away of the flesh. I'm going to propose to you that in a deeper meaning of this passage, God is saying his children are going to be not of the flesh. Yeshua said it this way: that which is born of the flesh is flesh, that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. All of Yah's people are chosen. We went before it a few minutes ago. Isaac was chosen a year by name, that he was a male, that Sarah was going to be the one to have him. A year before it happened, he was chosen. He was picked. Before the physical, the miracle took place, the flesh was removed. It was a spiritual decision by Yah. Think outside the box. It's above the plain, or it's beyond the plain reading. But it's not only Yeshua that tells us that. I mean, Paul says, not all that are of Israel are Israel, right? And he's using Jacob and Esau as an example. Okay? Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. He makes those decisions. We don't have the pull to make those decisions, to complain about them, to argue about them, or anything. Our mission is to follow him, and he brings us together with people. But he also tells us that there's going to be wheat and tares everywhere. We're in the wilderness right now. much as Israel was in the wilderness coming through the wilderness out of Egypt, okay? We're in the wilderness. Is that a parallel? Yeah, it's a parallel. Who's going to bring us into the land? Yehoshua, right? He's going to bring us into the land. Now, let's keep going. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male in your generation who is born in your house or bought with your money. And I think with the change of the name, the circumcision taking place, let's keep reading. He who is born in your house or bought with your money from any foreigner who is not your descendant, he who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money must be circumcised. My covenant shall be, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of the foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken the covenant. And thinking deeper in this than the plain reading, holding on to the flesh, not cutting away the flesh. Verse 15. Then God said to Abram, As for Sarai, your wife, you shall no longer call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be from her. Then Abram fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old, and shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? The natural question to that is no, that isn't going to happen. But with Elohim, it is going to happen. He said it's going to happen. And Abram said to Elohim, Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. And here we go again. He's separating again. Yah is. Then that Ishmael might live before you. Now remember, Abram had this son by the flesh. We all remember that mess. But he had this child by the flesh. He loved this son. He raised him for 13 years up until this point right here. Okay? Then Yah said, No, Sarah your wife shall bear you a son. And you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Now see, he asked if he might live before him. Ishmael kept on living. He had more children. It didn't mean immediately that he wasn't going to be living anymore. He's not living in the presence of God. Okay? And as for Ishmael, I've heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He will beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you this set time next year. Then he finished talking with him, and Elohim went up from Abraham. So Abram took Ishmael, his son, and all that were born in his house, all who were bought with his money, every male of Abraham's house, and circumcised them in the flesh of their foreskins that very same day, as Elohim had said for him to do. Abram was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, and Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of the foreskin. That very same day, Abraham was circumcised, and his son Ishmael, and all of the men of the house, born in the house, or bought with money from a foreigner, he circumcised with him. Okay? Now, it may seem a little far out and a little stretched out for some of you to comprehend that, but there's a lot going on there. It's more than just a coincidence. Okay? Abram had a natural child through Hagar, right? As a child of the flesh. Abram also ended up having a son of the Spirit. Yah clearly was in control of that situation. He called it a year before. He knew it would be a son. He knew it was going to be Isaac. And he knew that because he did it. He took care of it. He laid it out. And so as we get to going through the book of Judges here, I want us to understand he's working all sides of the equation. And if he was doing it in the book of Judges, and he doesn't change, guess who's doing it today? He's working both sides of the equation. So even if things get ugly and look like they're horrible, he's still in control. Absolute control. We know the things are going to wait. We know the way things are going to go down. Or so we think. We think we got a grasp on some of it. A little of it, more of it. Some of us more than others. Okay, but we don't know fully how everything's going to take care. All through these times, do you really think there was nobody that wasn't doing what Yah said to do? I mean, if you think about it, Yeshua said in John 16, in this world you're going to have tribulation. So his people have to deal with difficult situations. They have to deal with death. The apostles are a great example, right? Or you go to the prophets. The prophets had the same problem, right? They were killed. Well, wait a minute. They were doing what Yah said to do. Absolutely. And with the prophets, for example, all that happened to the prophets, Yeshua turns that right around when when he was having some intense fellowship with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, just before he was crucified, okay? And he starts telling them about parables and how the parable of the vineyard, right? And he sent people to you to get the fruit, and you rejected them. He's talking about his prophets. That's the prophets. And Israel rejected him at that time. He is the prophet that Moses, Yeshua himself is the prophet that Moses said was going to be the one that Yah sent. That's why at the river, when John was baptizing and the Pharisees come up and tried to question him about what he was doing, they asked him, are you the prophet? They asked that specific question. Are you the prophet? What prophet? The prophet Moses was talking about is exactly the question that they were asking. He said, no, I'm not. I'm not. So what I hope I got across today was Yah's in control of both sides. He's operating both sides. He will discipline his children just like he says he's going to discipline his children. He does it in his time. You may think you got away with something. I may think I've gotten away with something. But then all of a sudden, it's time. So he's in complete control. And we're going to see as we go through Judges, he still protects his people. He's always going to have that remnant. We are part of that today. We're part of those that survived the book of Judges, and all the rest of the stuff that we're going to go through as we get up here. That we're here because of that. We're here because of Yah's hand of protection on all of that. We have the scriptures because of what those that have gone before us have done. And that too is by the hand of Yah. All right? So does anybody have any questions or comments, complaints? Okay. Nothing, huh? Okay. I love you guys. So now it's time to
Where our hearts receive the blessing.